For years, certain regions of the United States have been heavily dependent on Canadian electricity to keep their power grids running smoothly. This reliance has largely gone unnoticed, but as economic tensions between the two countries escalate, the situation is taking a dramatic turn. Canada, which has long supplied electricity to U.S. states such as Minnesota, Michigan, and New York, is now considering cutting off this vital resource as part of a broader response to newly imposed American tariffs. If Canada follows through, millions of Americans could experience serious power shortages, leading to significant economic consequences. To understand how the relationship between the U.S. and Canada reached this point, it is important to look back at how the trade conflict began. One evening in late 2024, during a private dinner at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump, then the president-elect, made a comment that took many by surprise. Turning to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he casually suggested that Canada would be far better off as the 51st state of the United States. Initially, the remark was met with an awkward silence, followed by hesitant laughter. Many assumed he was simply making an offhand joke. However, Trump, known for his bold and often provocative statements, continued to press the idea, claiming that under U.S. governance, Canadians would enjoy lower taxes and a superior healthcare system. At the time, Trudeau responded with little more than a polite smile, seemingly dismissing the remark as casual dinner talk. However, the topic did not fade away. Just a few days later, on December 10, 2024, Trump posted on his social media platform, Truth Social, referring to Trudeau not as the Prime Minister of Canada but as Governor Justin Trudeau of the great state of Canada. The post immediately triggered a wave of reactions online, sparking widespread speculation about whether Trump was serious. Social media erupted with a mix of amusement, outrage, and confusion. Then, on December 18, Trump made another claim, insisting that a significant number of Canadians were actually in favor of joining the U.S. He offered no evidence to support this assertion, but his supporters quickly amplified the message, spreading memes and debates across various platforms. By early January 2025, tensions escalated further when Trump took concrete action. He announced that unless Canada strengthened its border security, the U.S. would impose a steep 25% tariff on all Canadian imports. His justification for this move was that the U.S. was effectively subsidizing Canada to the tune of nearly $300 billion and that if America was paying for Canada's prosperity, it might as well absorb it into the Union. The ultimatum was clear: comply with U.S. demands or face severe economic consequences. On January 7, 2025, Trudeau finally broke his silence and publicly rejected the notion of Canada ever becoming part of the United States. Speaking to reporters with a smirk, he stated emphatically that there was not a snowball's chance in hell that such an idea would ever become reality. Rather than backing down, Trump appeared to double down, continuing to push the concept online. On December 25, 2024, he posted yet another message on Truth Social, claiming that if Canada agreed to become part of the U.S., taxes would drop by 60%, businesses would experience unprecedented growth, and Canada would gain unparalleled military protection. On February 1, 2025, Trump made his most aggressive move yet, officially announcing the implementation of a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods, set to take effect just 3 days later. Canadian officials were infuriated and quickly devised a countermeasure. On February 2, Canada retaliated with its own set of tariffs targeting $155 billion worth of U.S. imports, including a direct $30 billion in penalties on key American products. While tensions seemed to be reaching their peak, a temporary truce was established after a direct conversation between Trudeau and Trump. Both leaders agreed to pause the implementation of tariffs for 30 days in an attempt to negotiate a resolution. However, Canada made it clear that if the U.S. reinstated the tariffs once the truce expired, they would not hesitate to retaliate further. Canadian officials were already considering additional economic measures to counteract U.S. pressure. One of the most impactful strategies involved limiting American access to critical Canadian exports, including vital minerals and energy products. Since the U.S. heavily relies on these resources, restricting access would have significant consequences for American industries. Another tactic under consideration was preventing U.S. companies from bidding on Canadian government contracts, further reducing economic cooperation. However, the most drastic potential response was the possibility of Canada cutting off electricity exports to key American states, a move that could cause widespread disruptions for millions of U.S. residents. At the same time, Canada was actively working to reduce its reliance on the U.S. market by strengthening trade relationships with Asia and Europe. The recent expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, completed in May 2024, significantly increased Canada's capacity to export oil directly to Asian markets, opening up new economic opportunities. Alberta, the heart of Canada's energy sector, wasted no time in capitalizing on these developments. In February 2025, Alberta's Environment Minister, Rebecca Schultz, traveled to Tokyo to discuss liquefied natural gas, LNG, exports with Japanese officials and major energy corporations. Canada presented itself as a stable and geopolitically secure energy provider, highlighting its reliable supply chains and shorter shipping times compared to competitors. Beyond the oil and gas industry, Canada was undergoing a broader economic shift. Ontario's Premier, Doug Ford, publicly hinted at the possibility of shutting down electricity exports to U.S. states like Minnesota, Michigan, and New York if the tariffs remained in place. Since approximately 1.5 million Americans rely on Canadian electricity, this would pose a major challenge to regional power grids. As the trade war intensified, Canadian nationalism surged. Social media movements encouraged consumers to buy locally and reduce dependence on American products. The government took note of this shift and explored policies to strengthen internal trade between provinces, aiming to make Canada's economy more self-sufficient and resilient to external pressures. Behind closed doors, Trudeau grew increasingly concerned about Trump's long-term intentions. In private meetings with business and labor leaders, he raised a troubling question. Was Trump's push for economic leverage merely a stepping stone towards something bigger? Trudeau pointed out that Trump had repeatedly floated the idea of Canada joining the U.S., and while many dismissed it as a joke, the persistent rhetoric suggested otherwise. He speculated that the true motive behind Trump's actions was to gain access to Canada's vast natural resources, including oil, minerals, and freshwater. If the U.S. succeeded in economically pressuring Canada into submission, the benefits for Washington would be enormous. Canada's wealth in natural resources is crucial to the U.S. economy. Over 97% of Canada's oil exports are sent directly to the United States, making Canadian crude an essential component of the U.S. energy supply. Similarly, Canada exports massive amounts of natural gas, aluminum, nickel, and uranium, resources that American industries and military operations heavily depend on. Any disruption in these exports would have immediate and severe consequences for the U.S. With all these factors in play, the growing trade conflict between the two countries was about more than just tariffs. It was a battle over economic influence, energy security, and national sovereignty. While Trump continued to push for deeper economic integration, or even outright annexation, Canada was taking decisive steps to reinforce its independence. Strengthening trade ties with Asia and Europe, boosting domestic production, and limiting strategic exports to the U.S. were all measures designed to ensure Canada's long-term security. The coming months would determine the future of this escalating conflict. Would Canada successfully reposition itself as a global economic power independent of American influence, or would the U.S. find a way to tighten its grip? As both countries braced for the next phase of economic negotiations, one thing was clear: this was no ordinary trade dispute. It was a high-stakes confrontation with profound implications for the future of North American relations.